You're listening to the Men's Dating Mastery Podcast with host Alec Chase, bringing you the experts in dating, sex, and relationships.
Welcome to episode 18 of the MDM podcast. This particular episode has challenged me to think in new and interesting ways and really consumed my thoughts for some time, so I'm very curious to know how it will impact you. My guest today is Max Nachamkin. Max is a dating and relationship coach and is often described as a spiritual thought leader in his industry. In this conversation, we focus on the importance of allowing yourself to fully experience your emotions in order to overcome whatever may be holding you back, no matter how unpleasant or gut-wrenching those emotions may be. In that context, we talk about things like confidence, and I'm sure you're really tired of hearing about confidence by now, but there's really no way of avoiding the conversation when we're talking about dating and relationships. Plus, Max's perspective on confidence is pretty unique, so I encourage you to really consider what he has to say. We also talk about the value of asking yourself questions and surrounding yourself with other people in order to see and grow past your blind spots. Max explains why self-identity is a malleable thing, how to dissociate yourself from your thoughts, why affirmations don't work, why Max believes that you need to rid yourself of your fear of abandonment before committing to a monogamous relationship, and other interesting gems. And in case you're wondering what all of this has to do with your interactions with women, well, I assure you it's got everything to do with it. So keep listening. On a separate note, if you have been keeping up with the podcast, then you already know that one of my guests, Frank Kermit, has been kind enough to give away 3 of his products for free to you, the listeners of MDM. These products are an ebook called The Emotional Needs of Women, a 3-set audio program called The Art of Charisma, from Creepy to Charisma, and another 5-set audio program called Pimpin' Your Pad. These are serious, in-depth products that normally go for $270. Frank was generous enough to give them away for free in order to encourage you to keep listening to the show. To get them, all you need to do is go to the show notes for episode 14 called Using Body Language to Create Attraction with Patty Contenta, or episodes 15 and 16, which are parts 1 and 2 of my interview with Frank Kermit called The 10 Emotional Needs of Women. You can find all 3 of these pages by going to the podcast page on mensdatingmastery.com and scrolling through the list. Once you're there, just click on the link under the title Free Giveaway at the top of any of the 3 pages to get the downloads. Like I said, these products represent $270 in value, which is why they will be available only until September 16th of 2015. After that, the only way to get them will be to buy them just like everybody else. So get them while they are still free. Now on to the interview. Hey Max, welcome. Awesome to have you with me.
Alec, what's going on, brother?
Oh, just enjoying the sunshine. It's been a long time since I've seen summer. Canadian winters are a little longer than I'd like them to be.
Yeah, dude, I hear you. There was snow here in Boulder last month.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah.
I don't envy you.
Yeah.
So kick us off by telling us about who you are, what you do, how you help guys.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Max Nachamkin, and I'm a dating relationship coach. And man, I've been doing this for a few years now, but basically what I do is I rewire people's paradigms around relationships to make it easy. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of stuff out there that makes it really confusing. There's tips, there's strategies, there's, all sorts of stuff that I've found isn't really, or, guys have come to me and they've been like, listen, I've tried all this other stuff, but okay, I know confidence is important, and I know being attractive, I have to develop certain qualities, but how do I actually do it? How do I actually become confident? How do I actually step into who I am as a man? And so what I do is I go in and I completely give them a whole new way to look at relationships that allows them to connect to women on a really heart-centered, amazing level.
Yeah, you know what? I've dove into some of your material, and of course, I've talked to guys that have talked to you in the past, Kevin Alexander being one of them. And the one thing I've noticed about you is you do have a very unique perspective. Kevin described you as the guy who says to just feel through things. And I know it sounds a little bit woo and kind of a little bit on that spiritual side, but it made a lot of sense to me. And I've got guys who are actively trying to improve their way around women. And sometimes they ask me like very, very, very specific and technical questions that I feel are almost irrelevant. And I'm always inclined to tell them, well, just feel it, man. And I know that makes no sense whatsoever. And so I think our conversation today is going to be a good one, a challenging one, because I'd like to take these concepts and I guess put them in terms that are a little bit more tangible for guys. So my first question to you just mentioned confidence. And one thing I've heard you say is confidence is a myth. And instead you propose the idea of self-trust as an alternative. So can you explain that?
Yeah, totally. So I remember I went through I had a lot of social anxiety growing up. And so, I did what every other guy did and Googled it, came across all like the men's dating advice industry. And I got it in my head. They're like, okay, cool. Like I need to be confident in order for women to like me. But what would happen is everything that I did was I was trying to be confident, but there was this disconnect because deep down I actually wasn't confident. And so I put on this mask to be like, okay, cool. I have to say these things. I have to do this way. I have to even, look a certain way and have like really positive body language for them to see that I'm attractive. And so my outer shell would be like, okay, cool. Like I'm doing quote unquote the right things that would make sense. And actually some of it worked, like I could develop better connection and I could develop rapport and like actually talk to women now. It was great. But deep down, I still didn't feel confident. And so I still didn't feel worthy of the women that I was talking to. And because of that, any connection that I had just reflected back to me the lack of confidence that I had and the fear that I had about myself. And so every connection that I had was just fear-based. And so instead of trying to be confident, right, the only way to be confident is by trusting yourself. And this isn't like some 4-step process that you can do to like become confident. But the fact is to like already recognize your confidence. It's like something that you already have. And confidence is just a byproduct of, and we can go into this, of like feeling everything. And once you start to feel everything and you start to like let go of a lot of fears that you're holding on to, then you'll start to recognize your self-worth and then you'll start to recognize your own confidence. And that becomes a byproduct of feeling everything.
So explain that. What do you mean by feeling everything?
Got it. So I'll take a typical example. I'll just use like going out to bars just because it's like a really easy scenario for guys to resonate with, right? So a guy goes out to a bar and he's like, okay, cool. I want to approach a whole bunch of women and do all this stuff. And, I'll approach, I'll get over my confidence, I'll build the muscle. But what happens is mostly it's coming from this place of not feeling enough. Right. And I have to go and build my confidence in order for women to like me. And so it's actually this fear-based mindset. And when you come from a fear-based mindset, anytime that you put that out and you act from that place, then fear is returned back to you until you fear that feel completely. And so instead of going out to like try and fix yourself, and that's like the energy that's behind it, you can just sit with yourself and then fear the feel completely. And the fear is like, oh, I don't feel worthy of a woman, or I feel like I have to say the right thing or do the right thing. And so if you go to a bar, instead of going out and trying to like look for connection, just like stand there and feel through all the need that you have in yourself to try and attract a woman. Feel all of your unworthiness, feel all of your uncomfortability. And then once you feel that fully, you'll actually pop through the other side and then like connection will happen effortlessly and you won't even need to do anything. And in fact, the energy that you put out is completely different. That's real confidence. And then women can smell that and will start to come to you instead. And then you don't have to go and like approach women. They just, come to you like you're the king of the world.
So we might have a range of different emotions. We might feel happy, we might feel sad, we might feel anxious or afraid. And the latter two are what we're likely to feel if we're going out and trying to meet some attractive women, especially if we're not used to doing that. So you're suggesting rather than forcing yourself into this state of confidence, you're suggesting instead acknowledge that you might be afraid, acknowledge that you might be anxious. Don't try to suppress it and essentially allow yourself to experience that emotion. And then by doing so, it dissipates. Is that an accurate restatement of what you just said?
Yeah, exactly. You allow yourself to feel that fear completely and allow yourself to break down. And then once you break down, it can't break you down anymore. And so then no one can threaten your confidence because you know that you have it. It's not something that you're trying to protect because your confidence is deep down. It's coming from the root of who you are, which you'll start to realize once you allow yourself to like basically break down.
I can certainly relate. It's a concept I've always struggled to explain to others, but I've certainly experienced it. I know that in the past, if I had some kind of anxiety or some kind of fear and I just tried to suppress it or distract myself with other activities, like it would just show up over and over and over again, and usually in more and more acute ways, right up until the point where I just allowed myself to be still for a while and to really assess what it is that I'm feeling, and then to ask myself, well, why? At least for me, I found myself going through this emotional but also rational process where I would allow myself to feel the feelings, question them, and then analyze them with my rational mind. And that would allow me to either realize that maybe my fears aren't based in reality, maybe they're just things I made up in my own mind, or that process might actually help me come up with the real practical solutions so then I could go and address them and get better.
Right. And that's the thing is, guys can say that, you can tell someone, like a guy that comes to you and says, hey, like, I don't feel worthy. And you can say, well, you are worthy, right? And they, on the surface, they can believe it, but deep down, their emotion believes that they're not. And so that's the challenge, like, that we have, like, with our human bodies, right? Is like, we can actually step out of our bodies and have rational thought and be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Of course I'm worthy. I'm born, I'm a person, I'm just like everyone else on rational thought. But if the emotion behind it doesn't actually align with it, then it doesn't make any sense. And so you actually have to go in, feel your unworthiness completely until you can't feel it anymore because it doesn't even exist. And then once you feel through it, then you pop through the other side, and then you can take action, and everything is like super easy and effortless, and you don't even need to try.
I know that when you coach clients, you ask them a lot of questions and you actually hold back. So you might not offer your opinion until the very end when you've exhausted them with questions and encouraged them to analyze their own thoughts, emotions, behaviors. So can you talk about that process, the process of asking guys questions, or even maybe even having guys ask themselves questions if they don't have a coach to work with? Can you shed light on that process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the reason that I ask questions is just because when people are having a quote unquote problem in their life, there's just something that they're not seeing. And I could tell them the answer all they want, right? And I can show them my perspective, but if they don't see it for themselves, then they won't be able to fully understand it. And so asking the questions allows them in different ways, allows them to see the games that they're playing in their mind that actually aren't working. And so the challenge then becomes, people who are holding their construct of reality so tightly that don't want to let it go because they're afraid if they let go, then they'll have to feel like, for instance, all their unworthiness, right? Like if a guy's like, I'm not, he's like, I'm totally worthy of women, but deep down, he's actually not having any women in his life, then there's probably a belief somewhere deep down that he's not worthy. And so if I can't really tell him like, hey dude, like, you don't believe that you're worthy. Cause then he'll just cause he's holding that construct that he is worthy so tightly. And so then he'll just butt up against it. And so sometimes it just has to ask, sometimes it is saying that, sometimes it's asking questions, but it's really a mix of just like showing someone what they're doing. It's just pointing out, it's just giving them awareness of what's happening. That's really it.
Let me ask you this. It's obviously always better to have an outside perspective, somebody who can help you navigate through your own bullshit. What would you say about going through the same process but alone? So if a guy, I mean, let's face it, a lot of guys out there could use some coaching, but they're never going to get it. Do you think they would benefit from going through that same process, but with themselves?
So the only way that you're going to be able to see your own blind spots is to be around other people. And whether that's, a guy being around women or being around friends, if you're just like sitting in your room all day and you're trying to like learn all this stuff, like if you're sitting on your computer reading books and reading manuals and learning all this stuff, you can get some logic there, but you can't actually get the experience that'll actually upgrade your relationships. And so you actually have to be around people in order to see the reflections about yourself and the parts of your subconscious that aren't being felt yet. And once you feel through them fully, because people are mirrors and they'll point out to you all of your fears very, very quickly. Then once you feel through that, then relationships become much, much easier. But for guys who like don't want any coaches, they can still do it themselves. But it's really helpful to have someone pointing out to them because they're probably stuck in some kind of pattern and they don't know how to get out. That can only happen through a human to human connection. And if the people that they're around don't have the awareness either, then they're probably going to get stuck in it.
Right. I know a dating coach, and there's a lot of people who get into this industry. He had his own path of struggle, and he was very, very shy around women. And so he started reading and watching a lot of videos. And eventually he described himself as having a PhD in pickup. And so he finally decided,
I'm the man.
I'm the man. I'm going to go and put all these awesome skills to use. I'm going to get the ladies. So he goes out to this big square. He spends 2 hours there completely crippled by fear, just unable to approach or say anything to anyone. And eventually he musters up the courage and he says hi, but it's just like such a weak and quiet hi that the girl doesn't even hear him. She just keeps walking by. And that's when you realize, holy shit, I really need some help. And then he ended up getting a little bit of coaching and going from there. But yeah, I agree with you. If you inundate yourself with a whole bunch of material and you don't actually have a sounding board and you don't actually apply it, then it might almost have the reverse effect and just cripple you and put you in a state of analysis paralysis where you know too much but practice too little.
Right, exactly. And so what he did is what most guys do, and that's what causes them a lot of suffering, is because they go out trying to fix their confidence issue by approaching women. Right. And so because that guy was going out and he was so nervous to talk to women, and then he started to talk to them without actually feeling his emotions or feeling insecure or feeling the fear first, then when he said hi, then she didn't even answer because she didn't even hear him, because he wasn't even speaking from a true place. He was speaking of I want your approval place. And if he felt that first, then he would say hi, and then he would have nothing attached to that statement. And then the woman would actually want to talk to him.
Here's another thing I've heard you speak about in the past. It's this concept of your self-identity being a malleable thing. So meaning that you can choose to change your self-identity. I found that really interesting. I want to go a little bit deeper on that one with you. What did you mean by that?
Well, in terms of this becomes a bigger question of who are you, right? And most people have the belief that they are their name, they are the activities that they do, they're the things that they say, they're the way that they act, but they're all none of it. And this kind of goes back to just I think of it this way. If you're standing right here and you're looking at, your computer, because we're doing this interview, and that computer's in front of you and you can touch it and you can feel it and you can see it, that means that you're not the computer, right? Pretty obvious.
Yep.
Right? So the computer is separate from yourself. So if you take that one step further, right, and you take it to your body, it's okay, you look at your arm, you can feel your arm, you can blah, 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 blah. You can see it, you can smell it, you can feel it. So that means that you're not your arm, right? It's a part of you, but it's not all of you, right?
Okay.
Also true. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you take it one step inward and then you bring it to your thoughts, then it's cool. If you can hear your thoughts, if you can kind of see your thoughts in your mind, then that means that you're not your thoughts. It's a part of you, but it isn't the entirety of you. And so you can actually step back from even needing a self-identity, because your self-identity isn't what you think it is. And so your outward expression is completely malleable.
So let me interrupt you for a second here. So how do you separate yourself, your identity as an individual, from your thoughts?
Pretty easily. It just goes back to the feeling, right? It's just feel what it's like to have a thought. And as soon as you feel what it's like to have a thought, then you take a step back, because you can't be the observer of your experience and be the experience itself. You have to be able to see it. If you're seeing it, then it means it's not it. Right? If you see the computer, you're not the computer. If you see your arm, you're not your arm. If you can see your thoughts, you're not your thoughts. And so all you have to do is just completely feel what it's like. What is it like? What does it feel like to have a thought? And then that puts you back into the truth of who you actually are.
And so the way I like to think about it is it's a bit of a conscious process. So you consciously make the decision to look at the computer and acknowledge it as this inanimate object. For me, I go through the same kind of conscious process where I might think something might lead me to an emotion, and because there's an emotion associated with it, I might think of myself as the thought. But as soon as I make the conscious decision to say, I am thinking yada, 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 well, if I'm aware of myself thinking something, well, then I am not it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I articulated that well, but that's how my mind works when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, if you're thinking it, then who's thinking it? You are, which means that your thought about who you are is not actually you.
It's essentially something you're doing.
Right. Exactly.
So you could be digging a hole. You're not the hole and you're not the shovel.
Right.
It's an activity.
Right. And that applies to dating in so many ways, because it's if then you just speak the truth, if you say something, or even a woman's you are such an asshole. And you're if your identity is like caught up in like not needing to be an asshole, like if you're super afraid of being an asshole and you hold to your identity as someone who's not an asshole, then as soon as someone calls you an asshole, then it throws your whole like sense of who you are, sense of off. It just like throws you off. And then you start to like question yourself. But if you hold to the truth of who you actually are compared to like your outward expression, then no woman can actually shake you. And then that's like what real confidence is. It's just like really knowing who you are.
That's good. So let's bring it back to self-identity. So are we saying that self-identity is just something that you essentially decide to be in your mind?
Yeah, basically. It's just like what cartoon character do you want to play today?
Okay. And so is it fair to say that by deciding to have a self-identity that serves you well is going to help you when you go out and meet women?
Yeah, I mean, it totally can. But the key here is not to attach to any identity whatsoever. You know, you can play an identity, but to hold it like to play it like really loosely, because then if you're clinging to, oh, I'm this super confident guy, and then you like all of a sudden have all this fear come up, then it just starts to break your identity, and then you'll start to repress your own feelings, and then you actually won't get what you want because you're resisting it.
So then what's the alternative? So if you choose to not tie yourself to any identity, then what is it you're doing? Like, what's your state like then?
It's pretty fucking awesome. It's completely pure. And then you can just do whatever you want to do because there's no like thoughts about who you are that are preventing you from doing what you want. Right. It's like kind of like, you know, people who, you know, especially in this land with the men's dating advice is like people carry this self-identity that they're not confident. And so anytime that they start to like feel through their fears and start to gain some confidence, they'll sabotage themselves because like they're identifying so much with this unconfident person. And they think that it's like that forever. But the fact is like you're changing moment after moment. And if your identity starts to upgrade, if you don't even like identity isn't even a thing. If like you don't even have an identity, you're not even a person, then you're continually changing all the time. And then you don't have to worry about like anything.
Actually, you know what? You just said something interesting, which reminded me of a lesson I heard you give. And that's, you know, guys who are trying to actively improve their interactions with women might hold the belief that they're not confident and in a way be reinforcing that belief. And I heard you talk about affirmations and I really, really like this. So I wanted to bring it up. You mentioned that affirmations can be good or they can actually be detrimental because if you're saying an affirmation from a place of insecurity or from a place of, I think the words you used were not completeness, you could actually be reinforcing that belief. You remember what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. If you know, you're sitting there like, okay, I'm gonna be confident now. I'm confident, but it's coming from this place of feeling like you're not already confident. Then essentially you're trying to fix yourself because you're not actually it. And therefore when you put fear, like when you act out of fear is returned to you. And so it's just going to remind you that you're not enough.
When I heard you say that, it made a whole lot of sense to me. But the question that popped into my mind is then, when are affirmations actually beneficial? Because if it's coming from a place of insecurity, then it could be detrimental the way you describe. But then if you're already secure, then what do you need the affirmation for anyway?
You don't. That's the point. Is when you return yourself to a completeness or a state of completeness, you don't need anything from yourself or from anybody. And then whenever you put something out in the world, it's completely pure because you have no expectations attached to it.
We've been talking about essentially handling your insecurities. I think that's a good way to kind of sum it all up.
Yeah.
One thing that you've talked about before, and this is something I can definitely resonate with, is that once you get your own insecurities handled, you start to become aware of just how socially anxious and insecure not only the women around you are, the women that you're attracted to, but people in general that you come across the day to day.
Yeah.
Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the reason that people have a lot of trouble connecting is because they're not actually feeling their feelings. And because they're not actually feeling their feelings, it's kind of like emotional constipation. Like imagine that you don't take a shit for like 5 years. You're going to get pretty backed up. And then when you take a shit, it's really going to hurt. But then once you do, like you feel so much lighter and then you can actually think again. Because what happens is, you know, you're all backed up. And so it just consumes your mind. Right. And so when you start to feel your feelings, then you start to you start to dissolve all of your emotions that are getting in the way, that are preventing you from actually feeling other people. And when you can feel other people and you can feel yourself, when you're not like backed up like that in an emotional way, then you can have real connection. And what you'll start to see is that everyone does it. Everyone doesn't process their emotions. And so people are really delicate. And as you start to feel your own stuff, you'll start to feel how other people are like really afraid of connection as well. And that puts you in a really position because you've worked through it yourself. Now you can show them how to do it just by showing them and being around them and processing your own stuff. And it sets you up as an example for them to follow. And then once that person feels through their own stuff too, then you can have a real connection with them.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that taking a dump analogy, but
yeah,
that actually is a really good way of explaining it, because you're right. And I've experienced that when you are just so overwhelmed with your own emotional baggage and insecurities, you can't see the forest for the trees because you're just so consumed with your own shit. And no pun intended.
Exactly. It takes up all of your attention.
Yeah, but once you let it go, the experience of having had it allows you to recognize it in other people, but because you were able to get rid of it, now you're free to focus on the people around you and the world around you, that rather than being consumed in your own little bubble.
Yeah, totally. So it's like, how many breakdowns have you had when it comes to like yourself?
What do you mean?
Like emotional breakdowns, like just being like super fed up and like, being super frustrated or angry or really sad about women, or having your heart broken. Like how many experiences, like when's the last time you got your heart broken?
Oh geez, it's been a while, but
you've had your heart broken.
Yeah,
right?
I have, and I've certainly had my fair share of all those feelings and frustrations.
Totally, which is why like you are more able to connect with women than most people, is because you've actually had those breakdowns. And so once you start to allow yourself to be broken by the world and by women until you can't anymore, then you're just like free to do whatever you want because you're completely clear emotionally.
I like that. It almost reminds me of a Jim Morrison quote. I don't remember it. I used it in a blog somewhere, but it goes something along the lines of, once you stand in the face of whatever it is you fear, it loses its grip over you. And that leads you to essentially freedom. Right.
Then you're completely free.
Yeah.
I had this girl that I'm dating, and we went to a party together, and we're not in a monogamous relationship, but we're really close and we're really connected. And, we're consciously going through all of our fears that still exist to feel them completely so that we can be free of them. Right. Because anytime that you have a fear, like let's take the biggest one, right? And I'll say fear of abandonment. Most relationships are formed, and there's like a fear of abandonment in the space of like, oh no, like if you leave me, my whole world is going to crumble. And because of that, when we have that fear, there's a sense of controlling. Like I don't want my girlfriend to go out to this bar and talk to this other guy because I'm afraid that she's going to sleep with him and leave me. Right? Have you ever had that fear of like, you're with someone and you're afraid of being cheated on, or, whatever. Most guys have had that. And so I know that in my past relationships, I certainly have as well. And so now with this new model, I'm like, cool, like I'm going to need to feel this fear completely so that it doesn't affect me anymore. And I'm going to need to like break myself and allow myself to be broken in order to like love myself for it, be okay, and then deepen my sense of self and my confidence of who I actually am without these fears, right? That's like the purity of my own self, not my fear-based consciousness. And so we were at a party, and, I basically told her like, hey, like I want you to sleep with someone else while you're here, or I want you to go like hook up if you want to go do that. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, like I don't want to hook up with you tonight, but if you want to do it with someone else, by all means. And deep down, I'm freaking the fuck out as I'm saying this. I'm like, oh shit, this is gonna suck if this actually happens, right? And so she left, and she came back, and she was like all wet, like she took a shower, and like my mind went to the worst places, as if she just like met like my best friend at the party, like fucked him in the shower, and then I'm all here alone, like feeling worthless as shit. And so what I did is I just like felt through that completely. And like, I just like let out all this fucking fear, man. I was like super scared of like, oh no, I'm fucking worthless. And so I just like cried for like, like 8 hours straight. And then after that, I'm like, oh, cool. Awesome. Now I can handle a woman like sleeping with another guy. And now I'm not going to try and like subconsciously control her because I'm afraid of her. See what I'm saying?
So did you intentionally say that to her in order to, I guess, make yourself go through that emotional process and achieve a sense of growth? That's how it sounded to me. Was that what was behind it, or was there another reason?
Well, Yeah, so it's both. It's like the main reason is like, yes, like I needed to feel that because I wanted to get rid of any sense of me that was trying to control her. And usually, like, so those fears affect you subconsciously. And so I knew like there was a part of me that was trying to control her, even though like in my rational thought, I'd be like, I'm not trying to control her. But if the fear is there, then it is controlling her. Then it's controlling you. And so, yeah, the major part of me was like, I need to like get over this. And so, or I need to like not get over it, but I need to like move through it if I really want to see like who I actually am around women. And yeah, so that was a huge part of it. And also like she wanted to do it. I think she really wanted to, and I wasn't willing to like hook up with her. I didn't really feel like it. And so like I did it for her as well. You know, it was like for me and like as a side benefit, it's like she got to get what she wanted as well. And that, that process, I get to release a lot of fear, and then she gets to release a lot of fear that her sleeping with someone else it actually matters with my connection. And so she got to feel through her own fears of losing me by quote unquote cheating on me or like sleeping with someone else while I'm there. And so we both got to feel through our fears and then have a deeper connection because of it.
Actually, you just lined yourself up for the next question I was going to ask you on that. And how were things with her after that happened? How did your relationship evolve after the fact?
Amazing. Yeah. Like the next day was really intense, because I was like feeling a lot and she was feeling a lot. And so we had some space. But then we talked to each other like the next day and we were just like, yeah, cool. Let's let's keep connecting. This is great. Because when there's less fear in the space, there's more love. And there's less controlling, there's less like subconscious manipulation. And when that's off the table, then all there is more connection that's more pure.
What did it do with respect to the trust that you have for each other after the fact? And interpret the word trust any way you want, because there's certainly more than one way to interpret trust. It could be emotional trust. It could be more direct, like I promised to do something and therefore I'm going to keep my promise. But how did it affect the trust in your relationship?
So the trust actually deepens and our connection actually deepens. And I'll tell you why. It's because when you are afraid of someone leaving you, you start to act differently. You start to act in ways that are really controlling, very manipulative. And like, if you're really aware of yourself, you can actually feel like this actually doesn't even feel right. This doesn't even feel completely good to me. And so going through this process and like really like feeling through our fears and then not leaving each other as people, like not like being like, this is your fault because I'm feeling afraid and now I'm breaking up with you. Right? That's what most people do as soon as they encounter conflict like that, or they feel like really intense emotions. But because we felt that emotions and didn't use it to like try and get the other person to stay with us and then chose to stay with each other, then our connection is deep. Our connection and our trust is actually deepened. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Because like when fear of abandonment is off the table and when you're actually not going to abandon someone, then you can work through all of your fears together. Wow. And then once you work through all of your fears, then you just love each other more.
Yeah, and the thing that stands out to me from that story is that once you've had that experience and you continue to be in each other's lives, then you knew it came from a pure place. It came from a place of wanting to be together rather than, I'm afraid of what it would be like if I didn't have you in my life. I'm afraid of that maybe I don't find anybody else or maybe I don't find anybody that's comparable. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's really powerful stuff.
Because then you know that we're choosing each other, not because we have to, but because we're choosing to.
So tell me, how long ago was that?
I don't know, a month, maybe? A month ago.
Was that the first time you've tried anything like that, or?
On that level, yeah, I've never been with a girl and gone to a party and then had her like hook up with some other dude while I was there. That was definitely a first. But earlier in the relationship, like months ago, like she hooked up with one of my friends, and that was pretty intense. Yeah, that was definitely the first time in which it happened on that level. That was like the deepest level of abandonment that I've felt so far in life.
I probably didn't phrase that question very accurately. What I meant is just being in a non-monogamous relationship where you know that the woman you're with is hooking up with other guys.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, I can't even make the decision to be monogamous with a woman because there's still fear in the space. And if there's still fear in the space, then there's still a part of me that would only want to be with her monogamously because I'm afraid that she'll leave me. And so I'd be trying to trap her in. And so until I'm completely free from like all of these fears, and like that's the process that I'm going through right now. And until any guy has gone through these fears, they can't actually, from a pure place, make a choice to be monogamously with someone. They can't choose it.
Right. So I think just about everything we've talked about so far has an underlying element of authenticity. I think of authenticity as being very much overlapping with the concept of vulnerability, and all of this is very, very vulnerable. And so I would like to make a little segue building on that concept, and that's the idea that when you go out and you play games, and guys that are studying pickup, a lot of that I believe is game-based. Not that it doesn't necessarily work, but you're playing a game, right? And so if you're playing games, then chances are you're going to get women who are also playing games. There's a quote that I heard Susan Winter tweeted, and I don't know if you know Susan Winter. She's this pretty established relationship expert, but she said this: game gets game, real gets real. I want your thoughts on that.
That's the truth right there. If you're if you're playing games with someone, that's exactly what you're going to get back. And, I did that for a while too. I'd go to bars and I just hook up with women, and I guess it was fun on some level, but because I was playing a game, deep down, I didn't even feel really that good about it. It was just a relief. It was just it wasn't even pleasure. It was just oh, finally, now I'm returned back to my completeness. And any type of connection would just fall apart. And so when I actually wanted to hang out with a woman and get to know her, it would fall apart because it was based off of game. And then as soon as I started being true, I started being real, then she would disappear because she wouldn't want to be real because she wanted to play the game. And so the only way to develop real connections is to start being real yourself. And then the people who are willing to play at that level of realness will start to come to you.
Yeah, I have had the identical experience as well. And I actually found that when you are playing games and you are getting those women who are playing games right back, as soon as you try to get real with them, a lot of them, the ones that have their own baggage, they'll actually sabotage their relationship with you because they stepped into the relationship with you on the premise that we're playing this back and forth game. And as soon as you decide to drop it and get real, they're like, oh, wow, I wasn't prepared for this. This is not what I signed up for. And I find they'll actually sabotage it. And I'm not painting the whole thing with, in the same color with broad brushstrokes, but that's something I've observed.
Right. And that's exactly what will happen. And sometimes if your connection is strong enough with the woman, she'll actually show up to meet you. So with the girl that I'm dating right now, our connection is so strong that now I know that I can become more real by breaking those fears, and she won't leave. Right. But that's only because I know our connection is strong enough to support that break. But if you just meet a girl at the bar and then you start being real after that, and your connection isn't deep enough to actually support that change and behavior, then she'll probably leave. But if the connection is strong enough, then she actually is given the option to feel her own stuff and to meet you at that level of realness, which can happen too. And so, there's a lot of stuff that's possible there. But yeah, it's when you're being real, the other person has two options. They can either vibrate at your level, imagine a tuning fork. If you have a tuning fork and you hit it, it starts vibrating at a certain level, and you bring another tuning fork next to it, it starts vibrating at the same speed. And so the only way that it could be the only way that they could be next to each other is if they're vibrating at the same level. And so once you start vibrating at a higher level and eliminating your fears and being more real, then the people in your life have to be more real or they'll leave.
So I would like to take the conversation we just had and turn it into something tangible for guys. So if you could offer as simple of a piece of advice as you can and actionable based on a conversation we just had, so guys can start going out and improving their dating lives or their relationships, wherever it is they might be at, what would you advise? Yeah,
the first thing that I would do is do nothing, actually. Because in a world where there's a lot of advice, you can tell you can feel through your initial level of fear about not having a woman in your life by not doing anything at all. And so what I recommend is just notice the parts in yourself that are trying to go get a girlfriend or trying to go out to the bars in order to meet a woman in order to feel okay about yourself. And rather just feel through all that emotion now, feel okay about yourself now, and then go out and then go do whatever you want. And so another way that you can do this, and this is one of the exercises I give my clients who are also struggling with this, is I just tell them to go to a coffee shop, and I tell them to do absolutely nothing. I tell them to get a cup of coffee or, whatever their drink, or not even a drink at all, sit down and just feel what happens when women start to walk in. Just don't even do anything. Just don't do anything, and don't try to not do anything either, right? If something happens, but you're not trying to force it. Just feel whatever happens when you're in the space of a woman. And just being around women specifically and allowing yourself to feel what happens, that will start to upgrade your relationships way quicker than anything else you could possibly do.
So can you take that a step further? So a guy goes through that process, say it's a coffee shop, and he goes and he feels the feeling of a beautiful woman walking in, getting her a coffee. He observes her, he observes his emotional response to her. How is that going to translate into helping him in the long term?
Because there'll be less fear in the space. And when you're acting out of fear, then you're going to get fear back to you. And all you're going to get is fear-based women, which is actually fine until you fear the fear, and then you'll like start to upgrade together. But basically the way that it'll help is your connection will be more and more real because you're letting more fear out of your system. You're just like processing it and like upgrading like who you are as a person. And in terms of relationships, in terms of connection, the more and more love that you have in your space compared to the fear is the better that the connection that you'll have. And so over time, you'll start to feel through all these fears, and then the people in your life will just get better and better and better, and your connection will be better and better and better, and your happiness will be better and better and better. And yeah.
So it sounds like you're essentially dissolving whatever BS you're carrying with you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can play the game of like going to like pick up women all you want and like trying to make it happen, but at a certain point, it just gets fucking annoying. It's just like I don't want to try anymore because there's just like I want to put my attention towards other things. Like I want to do hobbies. I want to go, I want to build a business, or I want to go like adventure. And like there's a certain point where you want to stop trying so hard to make it happen. And so instead of trying to make it happen, you can just let it happen by feeling all of your shit. And then like women will just start like coming into your field. And because you're not trying to get anything from them, you connect with them. And when you connect with them, some of them will turn into intimate relationships very, very easily because you're not trying to force it in anything. And like women can trust you in that space.
Yeah. And I actually like what you just pointed out about not wanting to go out and consuming yourself with this practice of picking up women all the time because there's the rest of life to live. And man, I wish we had more time because I know you specialize in coaching entrepreneurs, which are obviously very busy and highly ambitious people. But anyway, that unfortunately don't have time to get into all of that. But if guys wanted to reach out to you to learn more about what you do, how you can help them out, where can they find you?
Yeah. So, I'll give you the link, and you can put this, on the podcast page. But just go to maxnachamkin.com/MDM. Yeah, MD/MDM. And basically I created a really cool survey that you can take. And the survey asks you a whole bunch of questions about like what your dating life looked like, what your social life looks like. I can't speak today. And it spits you back out a really customized dating action plan of like, what are your next steps in order to date the women that you want? And, depending on what you put in, like if you want something committed, if you want something just like fun, it like gives you these different steps depending on what stage of life that you're at. And what there's 3 different dating stages. And it's completely custom. So you go and you put in your stuff and it spits you back like what you can do next to really improve your dating life and start dating the women of your dreams. And so it'll be free for everyone that's listening to this. It's just maxnachamkin.com/MDM. And I think that's the best way to get in touch with me is like, just go to there, get the blueprint, get the action plan. And then if you have any questions about it, just like hit reply to when you get it and let me know. And I'm like happy to help.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I'm going to give that a try too. Max, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, Alec, thanks for having me. It's something that's so like really dear to my heart. And I just love seeing people's responses when they learn this new paradigm of how easy that it could actually be, in like a world where like everything is supposed to be like really difficult and you have to take action and go after this. With this new paradigm, you can just like relax and like let the women come into your life and like actually like enjoy it again. And so I really just like love talking about it, sharing it, and seeing the moment in my clients and the people that I teach this to when it shifts from like really, really difficult to really, really easy. And on a personal note, it's like just really fun. I love talking about relationships and dating and those different dynamics and how that applies to the bigger picture and whatnot. So thanks for inviting me and having this conversation with me and asking really good questions. And it was really fun.
Awesome, man. The feeling's mutual. So thanks again.
That is it for this interview, guys. Don't forget that you can get Frank Kermit's 3 products, the Emotional Needs of Women ebook, the Art of Charisma from Creepy to Charisma 3-set audio program, and the Pimping Your Pad 5-set audio program by visiting the show notes for episodes 14, 15, or 16, all of which can be found on the podcast page at mensdatingmastery.com. Once you've found the show notes,
Click on the link under the title Free Giveaway at the top of the page to get the products. Remember that these products represent $270 in value and therefore will be available only until September 16th of 2015. So you only have a limited time to get them for free. After that, you'll have to shell out some money just like everybody else. Thanks for listening, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to Men's Dating Mastery, a podcast dedicated to improving the lives of men and the women around them.